Okay, so my talk today. It's about thinking more product and moving from Scrum to a dual-track Agile approach. Firstly, a little bit about me. I'm Suze Haworth. I'm a digital program director currently. I've held many kind of roles, titles, worn many hats over the years. So ScrumMaster, delivery. Okay, sorry, I'll try and speak up a little bit more. Thank you. Sorry, it might get a bit hot in here now. I've worn many hats over the years, so delivery lead, Scrum Master, project manager, currently program director. I'm working in London at the moment, consulting for an agency. I also love mountains, and if you follow me on Instagram, I just spam continuously with travel and mountain pictures. And also, I love speaking at events like this and really sort of engaging with the community. That's my Twitter handle. You can tweet at me, you can tweet about me if you want. I've also worked on these brands and clients over the years. I'm currently working with BT Business. I'm not going to talk about the new logo today because I know that's a little bit controversial. But I will be talking about Specsavers, so a client I worked with at my last agency. So back in 2005, which is when I started out in this industry, how did software projects run? This is the classic triangle, which I'm sure you've seen before, which is scope, cost, and time, that golden haloed triangle. And basically, a project was seen as a success if you delivered to scope, to the deliverables that were set out at the beginning of your project, if you delivered on time to that sort of timings plan you'd set out, and also to cost, so if you came in on budget. So I thought hitting these three things as a project manager would lead to success. So this is what I thought would happen to me. This is me running my projects, great success. This was actually me, because cost and time doesn't equal success. That doesn't affect what the end product is, what the customer does with it, what they like about it. So this is a quote from the Project Management Institute. A project is temporary in that it has a defined beginning and end in time, and therefore defined scope and resources. And the key word here, I think, is temporary. So a project has a start and an end, and it finishes, and that's it. So here's your project. Here it starts, and then it goes along, and then there's the end point there. So here's that magic point where everything ends, and it's all perfect. Said no one ever. This doesn't happen. With products and services, they live on past the end of a project. So I basically want you to forget about projects today. And I've got to mention Agile, obviously. I'm at an Agile conference. So what about Agile? So back in 2005 when I started out, it was a few years after the Agile Manifesto had come out. I saw still quite sort of a waterfall-based industry where I was working. We had this sort of traditional gated process, so it was more sort of discovery, define, and then design and develop maybe in iterations, and then sort of release at the end. But slowly sort of Agile has started coming into the world with people being Agile, doing Agile, and using varying processes, I think to varying degrees of success. And this is quite a good example of how bad it can be, because this is an Agile landscape map from Deloitte, and it's got all the methodologies, buzzwords, terminologies, frameworks involved in it, and it's a bit of a mess to me. So I want you to forget Agile, which is slightly controversial to say at an Agile conference. I'm sorry about that, but all will be explained. There's basic principles of good product delivery. So forgetting Agile, there's some core principles that should underline any good product. So number one, customer first. It's about prioritizing the customer and the outcomes they will value. So it's not thinking about the solution that you want to drive for your business, what your team wants to build, what feature you want to deliver. It's about the outcomes, the behavior that you want to change in the customer. It's about valuing getting working designs, prototypes, or software to the customer over defining requirements up front, so making sure your customer sees things quickly, and being able to feedback and iterate on your customer feedback. Second core principle, frequent delivery. So delivering a working product quickly to the customer so you can get that feedback into the overall cycle, get that feedback into the loop. So it's the team and customers working together to make adjustments to your product. It's not the team working in isolation from your customers. And it's about iterative development, so working and releasing frequently. And thirdly, sort of what underpins it all, team collaboration. So it's the key to making your project work, if you do work in projects, and also building a better product. And it's not relying on documentation to define requirements, share knowledge, obviously about face-to-face communication as much as you can, whether that's in person or on video calls, and making shared decisions, not making decisions in isolation. And don't forget your client is part of the team too. If you have clients, if you have stakeholders, it's one team and you should all be involved in these decisions and these communications. So back to Agile. This is the lovely site, which I don't think has been updated since 2001, because it's this image of all of them standing around a whiteboard just tiled down the screen. So the Agile Manifesto came out in 2001. The core 4 values behind it: individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. They all map closely to these 3 core principles, so customer first, frequent delivery, team collaboration. Also with Lean, so Lean is like Agile's cousin in a way, so it was born out of product manufacturing rather than software delivery like Agile. And its principles focus on customers, optimize the whole, eliminate waste, learn first, deliver fast, keep getting better, and energize the workers. Again, these all map to these 3 core principles, which should underline sort of your good product delivery. So, setting the scene. I'm going to talk today about Specsavers as a bit of a case study about how we sort of changed processes, changed the way we were working. So Specsavers, you've probably heard of them. Are UK-based opticians. They've got high street stores and also a big online presence. They're international, so across Australia, Spain, the Nordics, Netherlands. And I was working with an agency who were doing all the creative design, UX, strategy research for all their digital properties. We had 4 product streams. So we had book an appointment, contact lens e-commerce, virtual tech, which was kind of like your try-on frames online, and then glasses e-commerce. So we were split into these 4 sort of product slices, and each product slice had a Scrum team. And how that was kind of made up was that Specsavers had a product owner. We then worked with a third-party development agency who were the development and QA team, and then we had a UX and design pairing sitting within each of those Scrum teams from our company. And we also kind of worked at a more delivery level around that and also provided the strategy as well. So there were a lot of problems with the way we were working. So we had to go through this kind of process to understand what was going on and work out what we could do. So firstly, we had to understand the problem. We then had to devise a plan. We then had to carry out the plan. And then we had to look back and inspect and adapt. So understanding the problem. So you might think, from my talk title, I'm going to talk about the problems with Scrum. But I'm not, because I don't actually think that any one framework should be blamed for any sort of problems in an organization or a company. A framework isn't the magic answer to solve all your problems. I don't think necessarily you should doggedly stick to a framework either if it's not working for you, and you should be able to adapt that to your own company, organization, clients, what you're working on. So basically, don't blame the framework. Back to specs. So there were a lot of problems. The product we were building wasn't great. It was very slow. We weren't releasing frequently. We weren't sort of thinking about the customer. There were a lot of problems. And basically, everyone, and this is the client, our team, the development agency, were really annoyed, frustrated, pretty much like this, just pissed off all the time. We had people leaving our team. We had people leaving the agency because they just didn't want to work on this anymore and couldn't face it anymore. So it was a pretty bad atmosphere. There was very low team morale. We weren't working as a team. So what we did first is we held a retrospective. So we got everyone together to try and understand the problems. And we did it in a bit of a stop, start, continue format. So what do you want to stop? What do you want to start? What do you want to continue? Admittedly, there weren't many continues in that. There's a lot of stops. But we found that they did actually relate and map back to these 3 core principles that we were looking at as sort of underpinning a good product. So we had requirements being defined by a product owner. So we had the product owners basically creating everything in isolation, saying this is what we have to do. Product was defined by tech. So this was a really bad problem. The whole sort of sites were built on a legacy code base. It was built on top of, built on top of, built on top of. There was a lot of tech debt. And even just making the smallest changes on the site could take a long time. So we used to approach things with a tech feasibility point of view. So we'd say, can we actually achieve this? No, we can't do it quickly. Let's do something else. Let's fit in with what is feasible. We're also a bit of a feature factory. So we're focused on getting the features out there, build this next. And there was no customer testing prior to release. We'd sort of design something, it would go into build and be released, and then we'd start to test or use A/B testing or look at stats after release. Sprint releases weren't happening. We had too many stories in each sprint. We weren't getting through them. Work wasn't getting built. Our design and UX teams were very frustrated. Even when they were working on sort of slightly bigger pieces and not just getting told to design a button for this, it wasn't getting through, it wasn't getting built. And we weren't working as a team, it was really clear. We had the siloed product Scrum teams, who didn't talk to each other. There wasn't kind of one cohesive whole. We weren't looking at the whole customer experience across the product. We were looking at book an appointment or selling contact lenses. And people weren't involved in decisions, and basically they were getting told what to design. Specifically on our end, it was, like I said, design this button for this. So we realized we needed to focus on the core principles, and we needed to work towards building a better product for customers. And that was a really key focus and the key change that Specsavers and us needed to make, which was shifting the focus from the tech and the problems with the tech to actually what do we want to achieve for customers. So we had to devise a plan next. So this is where we brought in product discovery and also dual-track Agile to sort of enable that and make that work. So firstly, product discovery. This is kind of the process we ran through. So it's about discovering and testing that what you are building is what the customer needs. So it's delivering what your customer needs rather than what you or they think they want. So it's not what you and your team think that the customer needs, something that will solve their problems, we want to do this feature, but also it's not what the customer might exactly tell you what they want. So they might say, oh, we want this on the app or we want this on the site, but that might not actually solve the core problem. And I've got a really good example of this. So all these guys really, really think they want something. They really, really want it. But actually, it just causes death, destruction, war. So it's not actually what they need, just what they want. So how do we map this process? So firstly, we looked at existing data and research insights. So this was more not necessarily a first step, but something that should sort of be ongoing. So we would continuously look at data, insights coming in. So we looked at various formats. These are some of the core ones. So we'd obviously look at the analytics, we'd look at trends, we'd look at where customer drop-offs were, we'd look at the overall journey. We also looked at competitors, even where they're not doing it necessarily right. It's really good to have a sort of benchmark against. Existing research, I think this is a really useful thing when you're looking at things like, we were looking specifically at the checkout process, and there's a lot of research out there. There's been a lot of work done to look at ideal states, best use cases. So I think we paid $100 or so for this sort of research paper, and it had loads of information on that would have taken us just a long time to develop ourselves. And then also focus groups. Wearing sort of contact lenses and glasses are quite a behavioural thing. So focus groups are really useful for gathering information about customers too. And then we started this kind of new process for us of looking at customer problems. So firstly, looking at the problem statement. Problem statement is about focusing on the problem you're trying to solve and then having a measurable outcome for that problem. And it's not about jumping straight into a solution. So problem statements value outcomes over outputs. And I mentioned this earlier. It was this kind of shift from looking at outputs, deliverables, solutions up front to actually looking at what outcomes we want. So what effect do we want to have? How do we want the customers to behave? So in an attempt to make myself look brainier, this is a quote from Albert Einstein, and if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. And I think we've got a tendency to think the opposite way around, myself included. So sort of 5 minutes thinking about the problem and then 55 minutes trying to think about a solution. We're quite solution-driven, solution-orientated in this world, I think. So this is a problem statement framework. It's quite a simple one. There are different ones out there if you Google it. So how might we action so that benefit? So this is a particular example that we looked at as a first kind of discovery piece within this new sort of way of working. And this is the checkout for contact lenses. So once you've gone to your contact lens packet, you click on sort of add to bag, and you get this lovely pop-up here. So on this pop-up, you get your sort of product details at the top. You then have to fill in your prescription for your right eye, for your left eye, and this is kind of a trickier process for some customers. It's things like using sort of terminology you might not be familiar with, sphere, etc. This one's multifocal, so you have to add the type. You then put in your quantity, so for your right eye, left eye. You then get a little spinning wheel because it then goes and looks up the stock on this. Then it gives you a subtotal, and then it works out your delivery, how long it will take, and how much that will cost, and gives you an overall cost, all on one pop-up. So we had a 55% drop-off at this point because it's just you're being presented with so much information. Overall, I think the checkout had a 23-step process to get to actually buy, which is just crazy. And we saw this big drop-off on this point, and we didn't actually know why. We were looking at it, and we can't see exactly, was it the prescription that was putting people off? Was it the price? Was it the delivery time? So this was obviously quite a big core problem that we could look at. So as a problem statement, how might we make prescription entry more simple so that customers can complete contact lens purchases more easily? We then moved into making assumptions. So assumption is a declaration that is assumed to be true. So this is where we can start to propose solutions, start to look at how we can solve a problem. So there's a few ways to kind of start framing this. So our customers have a need too. These needs can be solved with. What problems does our product solve? When and how is our product used? What features are important? How should our product look and behave? And we will solve this through. So now we can start sort of making assumptions and defining sort of maybe proposed solutions or maybe a feature that could actually solve our problem. So we said we need to separate out the prescription and delivery in the journey to cause less confusion and ease that pain point. So quite a straightforward and maybe obvious one. But we thought that then we could start actually testing what is causing the problem. So from your assumptions, we moved into the hypotheses phase. So again, here's a kind of standard framework for building a hypothesis out. We believe that doing or building or creating this for this user or persona will achieve this outcome, and we'll know we're right when we see this signal or metric. So you've got something to measure it against. So we believe that separating the prescription and delivery for contact lens purchases will achieve a decrease in drop-off at this point in the journey. We'll know we're right when we see more customers completing the prescription step. So now we've framed a test for our assumption. So next would be UX and design. So that whole process, whilst it's taken me a few minutes to talk through, it's not like a really lengthy process. It shouldn't be seen as days or weeks or anything like that. We would do that sort of thing in a half-day workshop with the team and clients and development people. So it is actually, this is meant to be a really rapid process to get you to sort of validated ideas. So we'd move into UX and design. We'd built a design system for Specsavers, so we were quite lucky in that our designs could be put together relatively quickly using the components and modules we built as part of that. But a big sort of step for us and what we sort of moved to was looking at different types of prototyping. So looking at the different types of prototyping that we could use to test with customers. So firstly, we looked at low fidelity prototypes. So this is more static prototypes, clickable designs, so to gauge reactions to concepts and propositions, and test short journeys or just simple goals. And we used InVision for this. We had medium fidelity prototypes, so a bit more interactive, getting input on experience, the mechanics of a journey, testing new products and features and look and feel and motion principles. So here you can see we built this prototypes just sort of show the carousel working. And we use Principle for this. And then we've got high-fidelity prototypes. So these are live prototypes, engaging reactions to true functionality of full scenarios, testing look and feel and complex interactions. So here you can see this is actually the contact lens journey prototype. We built an HTML prototype for this in a few days. It didn't take too long. But it was really useful in that we could actually do all the kind of prescription entry to be able to test with customers. So next, obviously, the important step is the testing, so talking to your customers. So we used a variety of methods here. Face-to-face interviews, they were used more for the sort of high-fidelity prototypes, so something like the contact lens journey we were testing and the HTML prototype. We took that and used a recruitment company to get some users in and sat with them and sort of worked through the actual prototype, and were able to sort of tailor our questions based on their reactions. We used online testing, so validately.com, usertesting.com are some of the sites you can upload your designs to, pick user criteria, and then they'll test your designs and kind of voice over, and you get like a video recording of that. Guerrilla testing, I like this because it's cheap and quick. We just had our UX designer going out to like a coffee shop, offering to buy somebody a coffee if they just looked through our designs and sort of answered some questions. So good for low fidelity prototypes. And then we also sometimes did some surveys to get some more quantitative data, so sort of rating things on a scale. So obviously then, you've got your insights and you need to iterate on your UX and design. So this is a constant loop as well, sort of trying to feed into the process and getting better and improving the experience. And what does this sort of enable? What does this get? So one of the core points is that it produces more validated learning. So you're actually validating some of your assumptions before they go into build. You're speaking to customers, you're getting their insights, and you're saying, actually, this is something they want, or maybe they don't want it, and then you scrap it, and you don't put it into build and sort of waste that time. You're building things that customers need, so not necessarily, again, putting things into development which could be waste. You might sort of put them live and then your customers don't actually need them. It gives more business value. Again, back to the waste, you're trying to provide more value to the business by sort of validating the ideas that you have. And also it's about sort of creating a better backlog for delivery. So back to Agile. Agile doesn't actually have a brain. So it's not going to make your process smart, it's not going to make you smart, but having this validated learning, this feedback loop, actually can make your backlog a lot smarter. So how does this fit with a development team working in Scrum? That's kind of the big question. And this is where dual track Agile comes in. So I kind of mapped out this rough diagram of it. It's probably not quite perfect, but how we kind of did it is we split out our sort of one Scrum sort of process into two tracks. So we had the discovery track, and this was running the product discovery work, just exactly like I've talked about, so that kind of process. And then we have the delivery track. So the delivery track was the development teams. They're still working in Scrum, still working in 2-week sprints. We actually removed our UX and design pair from each Scrum team and pulled them into one team working on the discovery track. So this is kind of a rough split. So the PO, the product owner, would be sitting across both tracks. And this is the really important bit. It's not, dual track Agile isn't a way to split out the teams and actually go back to more waterfall ways of working where you feed the design into the dev, and that's a staged process. You really need that integration still with design into delivery and development back into discovery. You need that tech point of view within the discovery and vice versa. QA, I'm not sure I quite agree with this diagram, but I still believe in that sort of cross-team integration, so maybe QA is still going into discovery too. And this is kind of the flow of how we actually worked. So we had two backlogs. We had the discovery backlog feeding into our team who were running in more of a Kanban style way now, so that was a big change. So we moved out of the time box sprints into this Kanban sort of continuous flow, which provided our validated ideas, which then got fed into the delivery backlog. And then we had the Scrum teams working on the 2-week sprint still. And what I really like about this actually is, as I said earlier, I don't believe doggedly in having one framework and that's it, one size fits all, great. This sort of worked, I think, because we had this blend of ideas coming in. So we had some design thinking, We had the Kanban flow. We had lean UX, sort of this feedback loop. And we were also working in Scrum, and we were blending all these kind of frameworks together. So we had to carry out the plan. And I'd like to think it all went smoothly. This is me, like it was great, brilliant, new process, changed everything. But actually, this is probably more like me most of the time, at least at first. So there were some core sort of things we had to work through. First one being changing mindset. It was shifting to this problem focus, customer problems, not sort of focusing on solutions, and focusing on outcomes and not outputs, not the sort of features that the business wanted us to build necessarily. So we had to take people along this journey and really try and show them the value of what we were doing and this customer-first approach. Obviously, as I mentioned, it's about this collaboration still. It's working collaboratively so we don't revert to a waterfall approach and we don't have these two teams that are just completely separated and split off. And obviously, like I said, despite all the different processes we're using with different sort of parts of the team working in different ways, it's ensuring that the ways of working are clear to all. So our team moving to a Kanban way of working was quite a shift for them. They were still kind of wanting this 2-week time box almost. So we did have to kind of go through various iterations, for example, of the Kanban board. It wasn't quite working for them at first, and we had to sort of evolve that. We had to make sure that everyone was clear that we weren't on the same time box sort of 2-week sprint cycles as the Scrum team. So it was making sure that everyone, despite working in different ways, understood how we were working and why. And also a big one, I think my diagram showed it with the dotted line sort of coming back round, but it's making sure that it is a continuous loop still. So the delivery, once it's kind of out and live, and you're doing your sort of post-launch testing, so A/B testing, etc., making sure all of that just feeds back into the discovery backlog, and that's where sort of things and ideas can get developed again based on the feedback from live. So we found this really useful in putting in place our different process and actually sort of having something to aim for. So we built out an outcomes roadmap for how we wanted to change our approach, change the teams, how our whole process was to change. And we split this into 3 kind of core areas, people, process, and product, and did it on kind of a now, next, later. I don't necessarily like putting exact timings against things, especially when they're more outcome driven. So for sort of now, we wanted the team to feel more autonomous. We wanted the PO to not be defining requirements. We can move to that quite quickly, and we wanted to be working with problems and outcomes. So moving away from sort of solution-driven upfront work. Then we wanted less team churn. We wanted to stop people leaving. We wanted to be testing with customers, obviously, and then customer feedback coming back into the discovery backlog. And then sort of further out, we wanted the development agency who'd sort of traditionally been working more in isolation, away from any sort of customer or design work. We wanted them to become more engaged with the customers and actually attend some of the testing sessions and things like that. We wanted to be using this mixture of prototyping, so the low, medium, high fidelity prototyping, and then eventually improving the key metrics on the product. So some tips for implementing. Obviously, engaging your team. So we couldn't just decide we were moving to this dual track approach, this is the holy grail, it's going to be great, and then sort of say, right, work this way. We had to engage them, we had to talk to our teams, we had to bring them together and sort of try and get their input in, and sort of ask them if they would do anything differently. We've got an idea, but maybe this is not the right idea, like what do you think? So it's really important to get that engagement and take everyone on that journey with you through any sort of change like this. Classic Agile one, it's got to be safe environment for failure. Like if any process changes, always there's going to be some failure in things that you try and implement. So if people are scared to do that, they're never going to want to change or try to change or suggest changes themselves. Inspecting and adapting, another core Agile thing. So look back, make sure you hold your retrospectives about your process, keep adapting. Again, with all this blend of frameworks, I think that continuously adapting and trying new things can work. And it's really critical to understand and sell the value of these changes. So we were lucky, Specsavers were very ready for a change, and they did understand the importance of putting sort of customers first. So selling that value to them was quite easy. But if you understand what the value is behind your sort of changes, in process and ways of working, then that can just help engage people and help sort of get it sort of circulated around any organisation. And involve everyone, so it's not just you and your team, it's kind of stakeholders, it's other people working in the company, not necessarily on your kind of product, if you're sort of split. So it's just involving everyone and taking them, like I said, on your journey. So looking back, so there were still product silos. We couldn't move Specsavers very quickly away from that. They worked in these kind of 4 product streams. We did try to bring them together in these kind of workshops where we tried to look at the whole customer experience and map that out and get them working and sort of looking at the product as one whole rather than just a stream, but they still kind of had a tendency to try and work within those slices. It was a little bit too little too late, unfortunately. We still had team members want to leave just working on that account. We had people still wanting to leave the agency because of it, so it wasn't like a magic plaster, like fix all. It was too little too late for some people. And this problem didn't go away. We still had a lot of tech debt. We were still, like, with all the good work we were producing in Discovery, we still had a sort of ongoing issue with the amount of work we could get through quickly, and that could be built. So we had to start looking at that as a separate thing and how we could solve that and how we could move away from this very messy system and kind of separate off the front end so we could actually start releasing some of these journey changes quite quickly. What went right, though? A focus on the customer, that was the critical sort of change we made here. We got Specsavers, we got our teams, we got sort of everyone involved in the process to really think about the customer, what they need, their problems, how to solve those problems. So we shifted the whole organisation from thinking about this kind of tech feasibility piece first, like what can we do with this code base, to actually thinking, right, what does the customer want? How do they buy contact lenses? How do they want to buy contact lenses or glasses? So a real focus on the customer. We also had a lot less development waste. So we did actually, in the old sort of ways of working, go through and build stuff and then realise it wasn't working when we tested it on live. So because of this kind of slow process as well, the slower process of development, this was actually really significant as well because things were slower to get out there. It was actually quite important to make sure we were feeding these smarter things into the backlog. And then better key metrics. We did actually, with some of the changes we were making, we did actually start to see improvements in customer drop-off, churn, things like that. So we actually did start improving the key metrics, which was really important to validate our case for our changes and also with the business. And also a happier team. In general, despite the sort of few who still wanted to leave, our team was happier. We were one team working together on things. And that's our sort of UX and design and creative and strategy team, but also as one sort of whole team with the development agency too. Everyone was generally happier in what we were doing, focus on customer, and the way we were working sort of slightly differently. So it's by thinking about the core principles around good product delivery, you can make customers and your team happier, which equals hopefully a bit of this. So my big point is think about these core principles. They really underpin everything about a good product. Thank you.